Hey there, welcome to ATL and 29, a Peachtree Hoops podcast where we look at the NBA from the starting point of Atlanta. My name is Kevin Chouinard. I'm here with Glen Willis and Tyler Jones, and we didn't quite fix the Hawks last time, so we have to keep working at fixing the Hawks tonight. How do we fix the Hawks?
Uh, well, you start with maybe having the owner uh, stop meddling, and let the people that he hired and he pays good money to run the organization do their job. That's a general start, which I think he's done for about a year or so now. Really, since the DeJounte Murray trade, I feel like Wrestler hasn't had his thumb on the scales as much, but with how disappointing the Hawks offseason it wouldn't surprise me if he tries to go for one last big move to get another star next to Trey Young, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully, whatever the Hawks do, it's based on what the GM or what the front office wants, the vision for the team that they have, instead of like the owner being like, I want this guy. But we'll see with that.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I like the way Tyler put something a couple episodes back where he said the Hawks can't be afraid to lose a trade, right? And
Absolutely.
last off season, they were very careful about not forcing themselves into something that didn't move them forward. What they have now, they didn't have then, was some young guys that are showing some promise and young guys that need to play some decent amount next year. And so, what the little back and forth we had a few episodes ago was if you lose a trade, but it opens up playing time for the right people, the right players, then in the broader sense, that is a way to move your roster forward. So I think they have to not try to win individual transactions. I think they need to believe in their vision for the kind of roster they need to do the things that Quinn really wants his team to be able to do. And that looks like over a series of moves, one step forward, two steps back, 1.5 step forward, and then you know, cumulatively you're moving forward 2 or 3 steps, hopefully, then that's okay, right? When Kevin Pelton writes his grade for an individual trade, which is always based on kind of statistical analysis and things like that. I respect the work that Kevin Pelton does, but conceptually, grading a trade immediately when it happens is leaving out kind of the broader goals, objectives, and those things. And so for me, I think they just need to really commit to iterating the roster forward to having the skill distribution, skill variety, the versatility that it needs to have to do the things that Quinn really wants to make this do. If that means that, for example, you trade DeJounte and you don't get a massive return for him, if that means you trade DeJounte and the optics of what you sent out for him and then what you got back in that kind of tight kind of perspective is not doesn't kind of stack up on paper as a win, can still be okay if you are setting yourselves up to kind of make the broader moves that are necessary, right? It doesn't go
Glenn,
back. Yeah.
I'll put it what you're saying in a different way. Because I was actually thinking about I was thinking about this when we were kind of having this podcast about what we want to talk about with the Hawks. And I was like, one vision the Hawks need to have, they got to find a way to find their Nickeil Alexander Walker.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like Nickeil was readily available for all 29 teams and all 30 teams in the NBA could have acquired him for nothing. But the reason why he's had such an impact is he had the ability to play. There was an opportunity there for Minnesota, and he was able to pounce. What the Hawks have had is I feel like their biggest issue the last 3 seasons is that because their roster is so filled with guys who have to play. DeAndre Hunter has to play because you invested so much in him, and then you combine that with an extension. So he has to play every night. Sadiq Bey has to play every night. You gave up 5 second-round picks for him. John Collins had to play every night. You were paying him $25 million a season. Clint Capella has to play every night. You're paying him $20 million. And Yeka Conway has to play every night. Like, everybody has to play every night. So there's no real opportunity to find that point of attack defender, which is what they're missing. But they have all this, like, they have all this variety of talent. So to me, they when I'm saying, like, the Hawks can't be afraid to lose on a trade, the Hawks really, they can trade DeJounte Murray and get back, like, guys who don't fit the roster that they're willing to maybe even cut during the offseason if they find somebody in training camp that does what they need them to do. Like, they cannot be, like, they have to be willing to, like, not only just lose on a trade, look bad on a trade for everybody in the NBA to clown on. Guess what? The NBA already does it. Like, nobody respects nationally what the Hawks do and have done since their conference finals run. But what they're missing currently on this roster is, like, it's just an ability to find these types of players that might be able to fit next to Trey. Vit Krejci, the Hawks would have had no idea Vit Krejci was this type of player if they didn't have the injuries that they had this season. And so, like, that should be something exciting. Was like, hey, there's a lot of talent in this NBA. We just have to find it. And because we have somebody like Trae Young and Jalen Johnson potentially next to him, we can experiment a bit with different guys to try to figure out who is going to be our Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You know, that's really what I'm thinking of. Like, they have to find a way to open up the playing time. It might be Kobe Buffy. The player might already be on the roster, but they have to turn this roster over. Like, 36 wins is unacceptable. And everybody should, like, there's reasons why they ended up 36 wins, primarily because of injuries. We talked about that, but, like, still, with the amount of talent on this roster, like, something isn't working, and they have to be willing to experiment and make changes to find the right combination of guys.
I like what Glenn said about not trying to worry about winning the trade, because, when thinking about, like, the Pelicans, if you trade DeJounte to the Pelicans, like, maybe the most natural trade is to trade DeJounte for Brandon Ingram or something like that. And you could say, well, there's value. You're trading a star for a star. And it just seems like the same problem part two. If you make that trade, like, you're getting a taller version of DeJounte, which I suspect is better, but he's also not going to play as many games, and you're still going to have the same issues defensively that you've had all along. So
also the same
just
offensive
punting.
issues,
You're just kicking
Kevin.
the can down the line.
Yeah.
And so, like, when I look at the Pelicans, I see pieces that I think, if you trade DeJounte, that would be great, but not Brandon Ingram. And those other pieces might look like a loss on paper, but there's needs for the team, and there's also, I want to ask you about these sorts of things later, but, like, if we're still operating under the axioms that we can't dare venture over the luxury tax, then there are problems to be solved in that regard too.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I hear about Brandon Ingram every day, right? And I mean, you get it. I mean, the Pelicans look like a team that needs to make changes. The Hawks look like a team that needs to make changes, and so they in that sense kind of seem like natural, partners. But what I keep saying over and over is that, the trades that I think back across the last whatever number of years, like when the Bucks got Chris Middleton, right? If you go look at what they gave up for him, right? It was Brandon Jennings.
That was the Brandon Jennings for Brandon
Ursan.
No. It was just straight up. It was a trade of the Brandons with Middleton as a throw-in.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Middleton was a complete afterthought, but they were able to find
He wasn't
him.
completely an afterthought, but in like the write-ups, like, the Bucks wanted him, and that was a significant part of the trade for them. But, like, when you look back at how that trade was written up, it was just the Brandon for Brandon trade.
Yeah, and so for me, I'm like, who's the next Chris Middleton?
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you the team that can identify a guy like that was playing for some coach that didn't want to play young guys and wasn't a lottery pick, and but has the size and had some baseline skills to kind of grow into. And look how much he's given them since that trade. Like he's given them so much, right? And so it doesn't have to be a guy that's at his apex right now. In
Apex
fact, if
like
you get a guy who's already there, you're going to have to compete with other teams that are bidding for that, right? Because teams want guys that are ready right now. But for me, I look at what they accomplished in College Park last year. We talked about that a lot, and Kevin, you've reported more than anyone, in real time as you were kind of watching what was going on down in College Park. But the trust that the development infrastructure is different under Quinn and with Ryan Schmidt there and kind of the broader things, we saw that bear fruit this year. And so if you can identify that next guy that you can get, at a price that doesn't reflect a guy who's already, a starter level player, right? In that sense. And so for me, it's like, who is that guy? I mean, the Timberwolves I mean, he's not on that level, but they kind of got a guy who moved the needle in Nikhil Alexander Walker, right? And I look across the league, it's like, are there good young players the Nuggets aren't going to be able to afford to pay, right? And there are other teams kind of across the league too that, are there these guys who in year 2, year 3 have some decent baseline skill, have some size, and would just really need to be in a situation where there's an opportunity for them to play, just like Nikhil Alexander Walker had this year, for the Wolves. So that's what I look for. I mean, we all have kind of our pet list of young guys that we think if they got more opportunity would show a lot. None of us really know until a person kind of gets that opportunity. But that for me is like instead of being like DeJounte plus, I keep saying over and over when I talk to folks about the Pelicans, I keep hearing their top priority is to fix the center position. So I don't know how they make a trade for a guy like Brandon Ingram where the Pelicans don't say you got to throw Nyeket in or we're not talking to you. Is that what you want to do? I don't think that's worth it.
I
Personally,
like if the Hawks are going to do a trade like that, I want Trey Murphy, you know, or even Herb Jones. Like if the prices are congruent, like to me, I'm gonna be honest with you, I consider Brandon Ingram to be the Pelicans' third best wing, not because he or third most valuable wing. Like I just find what Trey Murphy the third and what Herb Jones do on both ends of the floor to be more impactful than what Brandon Ingram brings to the table, especially for a team that doesn't need shot creation. Like, I mean, they need it, but I I, I said this on a brass pod last week.
Who?
Like, fi- finding scores, yeah, finding scores is not hard to do in this league. It's
Right.
probably the most abundant like trait that we have across the NBA Association. What's hard to find is wings who play both sides of the floor and are quality 3-point shooters. And so like to me, I just don't think Ingram moves the needle enough. And I feel like that's not like the Hawks need to pinpoint the type of player they need. Now, if it's because like just in general, like I just think the general thing the Hawks need most is defense, particularly on the perimeter, point of attack defenders, and more 3-point shooting. Hopefully in the front court. Uh, somebody like a Kevin Love or a Davis Bertans on a cheap deal. Like those are guys the Hawks need to probably key in on, but they have to create the roster space for that player to be a acquirable and B have the playing time and be interested in coming to Atlanta. The Hawks have had a hard time, like beyond the fact they're not paying that much for like they've had a hard time finding a third point guard because they have Trey and DeJounte on the roster, and every point guard who's like a free agent doesn't even want to look at the Hawks because there's no playing time available, and so you're left with having to respect the Trent Forrest, but like that's the quality of player you have to rely on as your quote unquote third point guard. And so I just think like they really need to be willing to, and not just with DeJounte, with DeAndre, with Capella, maybe even a combo. If there's a deal that makes the Hawks better, and you have to trade a combo to do it, then that's just something you have to look into, just because of a combo's position. Now, I personally think, even though a combo had a down year, I wouldn't trade him, just because the fit next to Jalen is so good. But like they have to be, they cannot be scared not only to lose on trades, but also to make decisions. Like their indecision on the Capella Okongwu situation, I feel like has really held them back in a lot of regards. It's held them back in their ability to be versatile in the lineups they can potentially play out on the floor. They can't, like they have no ability to acquire a stretch shooting center, because what center will want to play for the Hawks when you got Okongwu and Capella on the roster? So they got to make a decision at the center position. They got, like, I'm hoping they've already made this decision in regards to Trey DeJounte, because they got to know that doesn't work. So, but we'll see with this front office.
It's funny. Think back to last summer. We were, there's all the Siakam news, and then it seemed like the Hawks. Some reporting suggested the Hawks wanted to do a deal with Dallas and wanted, you know, Josh Green, and I mean Josh Green is. I mean, then you kind of fast forward to now, right? There was some curiosity around what the Brooklyn was going to do with a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith, and Brooklyn was like, we want 2 firsts, and Dallas was like, we're not trading Josh Green. Josh Green has played 20 minutes one time in this first round series so far.
It's Josh Green.
He's playing behind Dante Exum and Derrick Jones Jr. Right, those two guys have been playing ahead of him for months, right? And in Brooklyn, like Dorian Finney-Smith, 28 minutes a game, and I mean, Cam Johnson played 27 minutes a game up there. It's just kind of a weird season up there in Brooklyn. So they wanted the 2 firsts for Cam. Like, so I mean, so the Hawks, I think, were smart to like not jump at, like they did with DeJounte. They kind of jumped at whatever the price was. I mean, that seems clear, right? But last year, the Hawks fans were so frustrated they couldn't get a deal done. But to me, they were smart to not jump at whatever the price was, like they did with DeJounte. And now the market for those guys, you think, is a lot more palatable, and I think they're going to have a better chance to get a guy for a price they can afford, much more realistically than they could last summer.
I'm not sure. Capella's more nuanced. I don't think it was just they were holding up on Josh Green. I think there were some other factors. I still think they probably should have just taken the deal Dallas was offering. But like it is understandable, and it's kind of wild to think that they were holding firm on somebody like Josh Green. Understandable at the time, because he had a good into the season that year. But like, I mean, a lot of teams do this. Like, I mean, the Brooklyn Nets, Mikal Bridges was completely untouchable when every contender, every quality team was trying to trade for him. Because I think they all saw like what Bridges did after the trade deadline when he was traded to Brooklyn wasn't going to be sustainable. And like now, like what's Mikal Bridges' value in the NBA right now? Like after the season he had. So it's going to be an interesting offseason where the Hawks will have I feel like they will have an opportunity to acquire the player or players that they need to really push this team into a different and advance this team forward, instead of the muck that they've been in, because for the past 3 seasons, they've more or less been the same team. They can't get stops. They lack shooting for some reason, especially since Gallo left. They have just not had the shooting. They just have not been as dangerous, particularly in the front court. And like, so hopefully this offseason they can really look at what, because I still rant about this on Twitter. Like, man, the Hawks were a good team, and they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals because they had Trae Young paired up to 2 elite shooters, and then 2 good defensive big men who covered for everybody. And like one of the good shooters, Kevin Huerter, was good enough at the point of attack. Like, he wasn't special that year, but like he did his job. And they just like they've never tried. Like I feel like they've never tried to go back to it because they've been trying to fit DeAndre Hunter into this plan. They tried to fit Sadiq Bey into this plan, and it's like they're just not good enough shooters or defenders to justify the minutes that they've gotten on this team these last couple of years. And so they need to understand, like, even if you, however you good you think Hunter, Bay are, you got to be willing to make a decision there. Be like, do we really need two of this functionally the same guy? They're different players. They have different skill sets. One's better offensively, one's better defensively. But like at the end of the day, like functionally in terms of impact, they're kind of the same player. So they got to be willing to make a decision there as well.
Yeah, so Brooklyn won 32 games this year.
Ooh.
Cam Johnson was 7th on the team in minutes per game. And I want to ask you, who's better between Cam Johnson and DeAndre Hunter?
Cam
Kevin.
Johnson. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
No, it's actually something that I wanted to bring up tonight, which is that I think what we've seen, I think we're getting to the point where it seems weird because you never want to say trade somebody who's the best defender on the team when you're desperate for defense. But at the same time, I think, we're enough years into it that it seems like just the combination of Trey and DeAndre Hunter doesn't work. Like
it never has.
Like DeAndre Hunter played much better when Trey was injured, and he played much better when he was coming off the bench.
9 days.
So like if you're gonna keep DeAndre Hunter, I think you have to look towards like that sixth man role that he was in.
Yep.
Because I think that really suited him well. And I just think if you can just keep him, I just don't think the chemistry, you look at Trey's numbers, you look at Hunter's numbers, and then you look at their numbers together, it's like they get worse, and it doesn't make sense. They're both good basketball players, but their skill sets don't particularly mesh. They don't complement each other that well. And so
it makes sense to me, Kevin, in the sense that DeAndre, for as much approved as he was willing to shoot threes this year, he's not Kevin Huerter or Bogey who will let it fly from anywhere. Like he's just not that type of shooter. And like if you're gonna play next to Trey, you're either somebody who is going to finish at the rim with force, physicality, and consistency, or you're going to bomb from three.
And maybe that's what it is because like when he's playing with Trey, he gets that mismatch. They want to put somebody big on Trey, he gets somebody small, and maybe he gets sort of psyched out of the threes, and all of a sudden he becomes this driver. But driving's not his strong suit. Shooting is.
Yeah, and he was. I mean, it was one of those things where we say, "Oh, DeAndre was better on offense this year," and he was. Like, and he committed. He leaned into the things that Quinn was asking his wings to do, right? But the baseline for the season was so low, right, that you have to take that into perspective. I respect what DeAndre brings to the team. I enjoy DeAndre defensively as a help defender. We've gone through all that sort of stuff, right? But if the Hawks are going to try to kind of build up and be one of the best, say, 4 or 5 teams in the East, his role has to be right-sized, right? Now he can create his own shot against mismatch, when he draws a mismatch, way better than Cam Johnson. Like it's not even close, right?
For sure.
His face-up game is good, for his position and things like that. But that's still something you shouldn't be calling on like 8 to 12 possessions a game of that from him. It's only when there's a mismatch. Like I remember back in his rookie year when teams like Oklahoma City would cross match on to try. I mean, he was scoring on Chris Paul. Like his rookie year, he was scoring in face-up game on Chris Paul. And that was there, but did Nate like say we're not doing that anymore? Or did someone smart say that's not going to be a primary source of outfits for us? Was it some of both of those things, other things too? But for me, DeAndre can help this team if he's in the right role and if the role is right sized, right, for him. But if you have an opportunity to bring back someone that is, a more dynamic catch and shoot guy, can shoot on the move, there, and then that's something you have to kind of think about. Going back to that Dallas trade last year, my understanding was like Dallas was trying to get any team that wanted Josh Green, they had to take Tim Hardaway Jr. Right, and Tim Hardaway Jr. is a fun player, right? Um, and just in terms of kind of just the entertainment value kind of being there, but there's none of the other teams in the league wanted this contract
Right.
to be part of any deal, right? And so that was kind of what forced the Hawks to, in my understanding anyway, to force the Hawks to check out there. So for me, it's like I mean, Cam Johnson like can't attack a closeout, like, and he's below average at that, and that's one thing where it's like, okay, does he really fit what Quinn wants? Because Quinn wants paint touches. He wants you to attack the closeout, get a paint touch. And that's not what Cam's able to do right now. But Cam has a ton of physicality defensively, He rebounds, and he plays hard and competes and all that sort of stuff. And he just has a better track record of availability.
And he has a better, and he's just been a better basketball player over the course of their careers. When Cam was in a better context in Phoenix, when he played with a real point guard and Chris Paul instead of whatever the Nets were doing, like, he was really good, and he earned that contract that he got. But now he's playing for like Cam is somebody, like, if his value is low because of the season he had, like, that's somebody the Hawks should be looking into and be like, you pair him next to Trey, he's going to shoot a bunch of threes, and he's going to shoot through contests, something DeAndre Hunter and Sadiq Bey struggle with. Like, they don't shoot through contests, like they just don't. Though I thought DeAndre towards the end of the season was really fighting against his nature to do that because they needed him to do it. But, like, it's just not natural for DeAndre to do. Whereas Cam's a rising fire guy. Yeah. And yeah. With his and plus with his size as a shooter, like, that's more appealing to me. But that's just one avenue. There are other players that could potentially help. Like, I mean, even some, like, I'm also thinking about guys like Isaac Okoro, who I don't know how the Cavaliers feel about him based on his limitations on the offensive side of the floor. But for me, I'm always impressed with his point of attack defense. And I feel like in the right environments, like, if you can get Okoro to be a catch and shoot guy, but he has the spacing to really attack the paint, he could do some damage, like, on the offensive side of the floor too. So like, that he might be someone who's available just because the Cavs might be devaluing him now, or somebody like Quentin Grimes, even though the Pistons traded for him, but that's somebody the Hawks have always been looking into. But these are like, what we're talking about aren't the elite superstars. Like, we're not talking about a Brandon Ingram. Like, to me, they've got to get more role players. They got to get more guys who are like Garrison Matthews. I know I bring his name up all the time, who just play hard all the time and shoot a bunch of threes and worry about, like, we can find the particulars of what we actually need later, but right now we have got to fix the defense first, because honestly, everybody looks worse defensively than they actually are because they don't have a point of attack defender. They're like an NFL team. They're literally like an NFL team that employs 4 safeties instead of cornerbacks. Like, they don't have a specialized defender at the front, and it makes everybody worse. It made DeAndre Hunter worse. It makes Capella worse. It makes Conley worse. It makes Jalen worse. Like, everybody just looks like nobody's able to really put their talents up there without it. Like, we didn't see Capella really be Capella, like, until maybe he got healthier, but also until, like, Vit Krejci and Kobe Buffkin were playing more. And all of a sudden, the Hawks weren't just giving up dribble penetration every possession. And so now Capella is able to do his job instead of like putting out all these fires. Like, he's able to be in quality defensive rebound position at all times and get challenge shots because the guy's right, like the defender is in the guy's face bothering him. Until they have to fix that first.
Yep.
and
Yeah.
then they can build out from there. But like they cannot come back with another team that doesn't have multiple quality point of attack defenders of varying sizes, point guard size, small forward size. Like it, they've got to come back with multiple of those guys.
Yeah, so you think DeAndre is a guy I think you pat him on the back and you say, good job, like adapting offensively to what we're asking you to do, but you still take into consideration the things that he doesn't do so well, right? You can do both of those things, right? You can
Yeah.
applaud him for the progress, but still continue to appreciate the things that he's, average to below average at doing, right? A guy like Isaac Okoro, right? You talk about him, he needs to attack the paint. Like when if the ball moves to him, he's got to attack space. If Clint's on the floor, that's harder, you know. And so you have to think about kind of fitting those things. A guy like Okongwu makes that easier, for a guy who needs to attack the paint.
Okoro is somebody who desperately needs to play for a team that plays 5 out. Like
Yeah.
he is
Yeah.
crying out for that. Like he's just so miscast on this Cavaliers team that plays with 2 centers.
But Veet's exactly the same way. Like Veet needs space, right? He needs
Yep.
he knows
Pete
how to
doesn't
attack
need it as
space.
much though because he's willing to make the next play though.
Yeah, but
It's
for
different
me,
for
like
DeAndre because
he's at his
he's a play ender. Like if Clint's in his way, he's going to shoot it anyways. Like
right. But
it's different.
what I think back to Veet is ball rotates to him, close out defender, and he breaks the paint like easy, right?
Yeah.
Paint touch after paint touch after paint touch, and that's what I mean by him knowing how to kind of not just use space kind of just for himself, but to collapse the defense and make that kick out, right? DeAndre's a below average passer for position. He's still a below average ball handler for his position. Veet is above average in both of those areas, and he's very smart. And he's a great processor, and he has all of that, right? But a guy like Okoro is going to be a pretty basic template for him in terms of what he does, when he's attacking a closeout. A guy like
Right.
Cam Johnson, similar thing, straight line dribble with his right hand, and so all those things have to be, I think, kind of taken into consideration. I still like, it's funny, like a year ago, the Nets were like, we want 2 firsts for Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, and there are games he didn't really play much for them the last couple months of the season, and he's kind of limited offensively too, but I mean, the Hawks, that might be a guy the Hawks can kind of, think about, it's a price tag kind of down where they want it to be. And so to kind of put a bow on it, it seems like we all agree. Don't worry about winning every single transaction. Believe in your vision. Look for opportunities to move the roster towards the cumulative skill set and versatility you need to play the way you want to play. And if someone says, wow, that trade was bad, who cares? That individual transaction was bad, who cares, right? What matters is in the macro sense, are you progressing the roster to being the kind of roster you need to do what you want to do?
We have a limited amount of time here, but I would be I think I would be not doing what I'm supposed to be doing if I don't ask you sort of to zoom out and take the bigger picture of, with Trey saying something that he said before in the past. I don't know if there's any added urgency to it, but at exit interviews he said, I want to be in Atlanta and I want to win. But I want to win. I forget which conjunction we're using here, but is there any added urgency to that? Do you think that he is going to want out? Like, what is when he says he wants to win? What does that mean for him? Does that mean he needs to see the money? He needs to see another star. He needs to see a cohesive idea. How do you sell this to Trey that, hey, winning is coming?
Yeah, for me, I
Go
do
ahead.
think there's urgency here. I think that I think this is the year where the rubber meets the road. All the reporting around the Hawks to Trey, I don't believe it. There's no reporting I've seen that is sourced to anything that makes me think. It just makes me feel like other teams are, stirring things up. But for me, Trey has got to be thinking, I should be a no-brainer all-star every year. Trey should be saying to himself, I should be competing for an all-NBA spot every year. He's that level of talent. He's that productive. He does things statistically that very few people have ever done. The piece that's missing, we all know, is winning, right? And he can't control that himself, right? So I think to me, if they don't use all their resources, which means like that they had like what $8, 9, $10 million even below the taxes last year. They
Right.
didn't touch, right?
Mid-level
Yeah, they have a
exceptions.
So,
$20
so
million trade exception. They have you.
right, and that right, and using all of that would may have put them into the tax. But for me, it's like I feel like trades like Tony, or Landry, y'all, fix this. And I think if they don't, I think if they kind of run it back and have the same results, I think next year it's very fragile. The trade situation with the Hawks is a very fragile year from now if they don't fix it. I think I can't speak for Trey, but I'm saying it feels like he's saying fix it now. That's the way the messaging hits me.
But to me, like for this team to be a consistent winner, the foundation pieces are there. But and they have the blueprint of what can work for them to win games. But they have to be willing to be like DeJounte, DeAndre, Capella. Love what you've done, especially you, Clint. Like, love what you've done for this organization. But we gotta play different. And we gotta be able to have guys like an Isaac Okoro, who's not a spacer, but needs his center outside the lane. So when he catches the ball and has a closeout opportunity, he's straight line driving it up to the rim, like how every other team do the Hawks. Like, you know, like Al Dusumu basically did in the Hawks playing game, where Capella's out the lane and he's just attacking all game and destroying who's guarding. Because you get talent like not even necessarily Isaac Okoro, but if you get a talent like Isaac Okoro, limited shooter, but has athleticism to get to the front to the paint and finish if there's no like rim protection, you got to be able to play with a spacing center like a Kongwu, like potentially like somebody like Mike Muscala, maybe not Mike Muscala now, but the Mike Muscala of yesteryear. They've got to but they got to be willing to make those changes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sure there are many more questions about the Hawks that we can answer soon, but maybe for this one, we'll just say goodnight, Bob.
Good night, Bob.